Hey, welcome back, everyone. So here we are at the last session of our day. I hope everyone has enjoyed the sessions in the water stream so far. Our last session of the day is Financial Issues Facing Small Water Systems by Aaron Jansen. So Aaron is a drinking water operations specialist with Alberta Environment and Parks in the Calgary office. His goal is to ensure that operators have the tools they need to properly run their drinking water systems. Aaron recently completed a Master's of Science in Civil Engineering from the University of Calgary. His research answered the question, how much does drinking water cost in small towns? When not working, he enjoys spending time with his family outdoors, especially on or beside Alberta's rivers. So please welcome Aaron.
Thank you very much. And here it goes. So seeing as it's end of day, I promise I will finish right on time, if not before. So just a bit of housekeeping. We had sent out a PDF, little worksheet that we'll get to at the end just to make it more interactive, because I know it's the end of 2 days of online learning. It's an honor to be here. I guess I'm in Calgary right now, in broadcasting from my home, and I have a wired connection, so I'm hoping the audio goes really well. And I'll let Ken jump in and give me a heads up if I have a problem. So today's talk, financial issues facing small water systems in Alberta, and like was said in the introduction, this was actually done as part of my master's in civil engineering in the University of Calgary. And I had two co-supervisors and then a third co-author. And you can see civil engineering, economics, and chemistry. So between the three, I want to give credit to Gopal Achari, Mohammed Dor, and Cooper Langford. And actually, Cooper Langford has since passed away. He was a professor emeritus and fascinating guy. Anyways, so thanks to them. This is, at the virtual conference. So I'm based out of Calgary, and I don't know if I would be able to present, except that it's virtual. So pretty cool how it's worked out. Just getting right to the point. Small systems face increasing pressure to charge full cost recovery, but the same small systems face cost challenges. If we were live, I would ask someone, what does cost recovery mean? And I don't think I figured out how to do a survey on this one, but maybe I'll ask Ken, the AV guy, what do you think cost recovery means? No, the truth is everybody that I ask what cost recovery means defines it differently. And so part of this research project was to look at what is it and what is the current cost recovery situation. So what's actually happening in the field. We then also looked at how would cost recovery impact affordability of water rates. This is a very awkward question, but it's what population would revenue shortfalls be expected to begin? Or to put it simply, where is the system viable or not viable? Where do those shortfalls begin? What's the population? And then to sort of look forward and try to problem solve, we tried to look at solutions emerging or real, like that were actually happening for those revenue shortfalls. And that's what I'll talk about. So I finished this in 2017 and graduated in 2017. We actually shared this research quite a few times in Calgary, Western Canada Water, and then you can see all the different seminars and associations. So AWWOA, the Operators Association, the Rural Water Co-ops, and then the Urban Municipalities. So it led to quite a bit of interest. I think through that, some folks from the organization were at BAM, and in a workshop I ran with the AUMA, and then they asked me to come and represent it. So I've updated it a lot, like especially the solutions. When we get to that, I'll show you some of the things that have happened as a result of this research. So here goes. Yeah, just we'll talk about data analysis, how we got the data, what we found, and then our conclusions. And then I can't believe I got slotted at the end of the day, guys and girls. But we'll actually do some homework, and you can pull out your iPhone, you can do the math, and then we'll be off for supper. So 25 small systems were involved in the study. Initially, we actually invited a lot more. I'm just going to move some stuff here. Move that up. We ended up going through the associations and electronic newsletters and that. About a third of the eligible systems were directly invited as well. So I contacted over 50 systems. 25 agreed to be in it or had the information. And what we were looking for was less than 1,000 people, standalone treatment, and a municipal system. So that excluded a lot of the campgrounds. Oops, sorry about that. Campgrounds or private developments. And yeah, ended up 16 out of the systems that met the criteria were in this 16%, sorry. So there's about 155 systems that met the study criteria. Alberta, just by contrast, has about 660 regulated systems. So yeah, you can do the math there for context. So in the end, the data that we collected was actually quite intense and laborious. So we looked at the capital cost, and that was the hardest part. We actually went through 25 years worth of upgrades and pulled a couple data sources together. We actually excluded distribution reservoirs and distribution piping. So this is all cost, right? Like just treatment cost. That's what we were looking at. O&M, annual O&M costs. So we picked a year. There's usually, yeah, 1 or 2 years. We picked one that was representative. We happened to get some flooding issues the 1 year. So we excluded that and said, what's the annual volume of water, the annual income from the water rates, and what's your water rate structure? And then we went to Stats Canada to look up the local median household income, which gives that, you know, an average income. In rural areas, I don't know what it's like in BC, but in rural areas, it's often quite a large area before you get a median household income because there's so few people. We did that. Truthfully, we thought we could do most of it by survey or email. In the end, it was an old-fashioned phone call typically, and you know we talked through it, and then they'd figure out where the data was and send it to me. So we took all that, I crunched it in through Excel and a lot of different things, and then looked at what we found. So we were looking at cost recovery. So really, what is the cost compared to the revenue? Here we go. So we came up with 3 big definitions. So one is this full cost recovery, the community cost recovery, and the marginal cost recovery. Each of the scenarios was and is in current use in the municipal sector. And you're probably wondering, well, what do those mean, and which one is my community or system following? See how this technology is working. So yeah, there we go. Just going to go forward there. So we have full cost recovery, and that's really, you're trying to recover all the costs. So you're going to get a little highlighter here. Let's see if this works. You have the provincial capital, so there's the grant funding. You have the community capital, the amount that you borrowed from the bank. And then you have this O&M cost. So if you're recovering all of that, that would be what we call full cost recovery in this scenario. Community cost recovery, that one, it took the provincial capital was seen as a gift. It was something that you didn't have to recover the cost on. And then the rates were trying to recover the capital and the O&M. We found with older systems, they were tending towards the marginal cost recovery scenario. So the provincial capital, or maybe even federal, provincial, depending on the grant program, that was seen as a gift, right? The community capital was seen as sunk capital. It's something you paid for it, it's done. Yeah, sunk capital. And so then the cost recovery is looking for this O&M cost and trying to cover that. Those are the definitions we used. We found them in use throughout, and often it would just be called cost recovery. So to help us figure out how to do it, we created tables under each scenario and then started looking at the implications of that scenario. So let's see. Does that work? There we go. So table one, of one table, don't worry. There's not a lot of tables in this presentation. Table one of one is the current cost recovery in the 25 systems. So the way to read this is, of the 25 systems, one of them was achieving full cost recovery through the water rates. Two of them were achieving community cost recovery scenario, and 7 were achieving marginal cost recovery. So if we think about marginal cost as the rate only covers the O&M cost, that means 18 systems, the rates were not covering the annual O&M, like the day-to-day operations. So this is a little plot that we published in a WWA journal. And hopefully you're not colorblind. It's a little green dot and a red dot. We'll see, not sure what it shows on your home computer. But really, without even looking at the dots, you can see there's a trend. First thing we saw, there was a trend. The larger you got, the more it tended to be cost recovery. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. That's what we expected. The one thing we did notice is there was a spread in the same size. And pardon the poor drawing here with the mouse, but I'm much better with a laser in person. There's quite a spread, even at the same size. So, you know, the question is, well, what's happening there? The other thing we noticed is the surface waters. They were the ones that tended to struggle more than the groundwaters. And again, that's what we expected. Surface water is expensive to treat. It's more complex. Groundwater tends to be easier if you get a good source. So nothing shocking there, nothing unexpected, except that most of the time studies that look into this are at, you know, they're looking at populations of 5,000 or 10,000 or more, not these, you know, 1,000 people and less. So just to summarize that, I mean, we could see a trend, but there's something else going on with cost recovery. And we thought maybe it's about affordability, right? So we ran some scenarios. We basically took a typical house, the 24 cubic meters per house per month, and then we put it into the rate structure. because everyone had different rate structures. And we ended up with this $25 to $84 per month. I guess what does that mean, right? That translates into a 0.4% to 1.6% of median household income. Now, back when I was doing my master's, I didn't really know what median household income was. And then as I got into my master's, I got very excited about this. I'm just going to say, if you look into affordability, there's way more complicated and accurate measures than looking at median household income. But for small sites, it was actually the one piece of data that we could get from Statistics Canada. So we stuck with it because we were looking at really small systems, right? But that in and of itself was hard to figure out, is that good or bad? So we looked at Calgary, which is sort of was the major center that at the time was saying they did full cost recovery. That site was saying, same calculation, about $54 a month, $50 a month for the water. And then comparing to median household income, it came out at 0.8. Yeah, here we go. So is that good or bad? Really, the idea is, how do you calculate the scenarios while maintaining affordability? So to keep it really simple, again, we're working with small systems. We figured out a lot of different industry groups are saying 2% of median household income is that typical affordability threshold. Interestingly, in rural areas, they actually say you should expect it to be higher. In the US, they'll say like 2.5% often is another threshold. We worked with 2%. And then we ran all the tables. So, oh, I'm sorry, guys, there's a second table. So this is table 2 of 2. I hope we don't have any more tables. We might, but bear with me. The table 2. So remember, what we're trying to figure out is, are people setting rates lower because they feel like they're not affordable? So hopefully this will translate through virtual presentation, but this is if not, you'll have to read the article. It'll make sense. So number of systems whose rates would exceed affordability threshold, yeah, they pursued a cost recovery scenario, okay? So this data set of 25, it's not huge, but remember we tried for more, and these are the ones that had the time, the information, the ability to participate in the study. Out of the 25, 13 would be less than, we'll just look at this column, would be affordable. 13 could pursue full cost recovery and still stay affordable. 17 could pursue community cost recovery and still stay affordable. And 20 out of them, 20 could pursue marginal cost, which is the lowest, the easiest for cost recovery, and still have affordable rates. So we'll get into what that means in a bit, but it showed there's room to change if people wanted to look at their water rates and also test against affordability. So what does this all mean? Just to sort of put it in context, marginal cost recovery is the most realistic goal for small systems. The water rates would be less than that affordability threshold, but there's a really big risk. And I think it's important to point that out. It doesn't actually account for capital upgrades or depreciation, which means when that plant hits the end of its life, you don't have money to replace it. So that we all have worked, not we all, I have worked in many plants that have hit the end of life and not had money to replace it. So as long as you understand that risk, there's a benefit. And the one benefit is at least at least cost recovery sends appropriate price signals to customers. Sorry, my kids are off school and saying hello. So the benefit is, and yeah, that appropriate price signals. Imagine if you have a user that uses a lot of water, at least with the marginal cost recovery, the rates will allow the operator to buy more chemicals and deal with the increased cost of that water user. So that's, yeah, some pros and cons. Community cost recovery and full cost recovery, we found a lot of systems would, the water rates would exceed that affordability threshold that we set up. So, and there's obviously risks associated with water that's not affordable, but it's not all systems. So an increasing number exceeded the threshold, but there's some definite benefits with those scenarios. So the co-authors and I published a paper in AWWA and then in Western Canada Water on this, if you want to read into it. The way, like what I took out of this was this financial capability. Is the system able to meet the costs of running the water system? And it's looking longer term. It's looking at maybe 20, 25 years, not right now, but what happens in the future. So the little schematic here, it shows revenue is the blue, the green line would be the cost. You have customers or population. You have an annual amount of money per customer. And the red arrow there would be the shortfall. And of course, if you have a shortfall, you have to make it up somehow. And how you make it up is a whole nother topic. I think a lot of us in industry know, you know, it's this lack of maintenance, lack of preventative maintenance, maybe high burnout of operators because not staffed properly, that kind of stuff. So I guess just it's the end of the day, end of the session, so I won't belabor it, but basically we had a cost equation for groundwater and one for surface water. And then we compared it to that revenue expected, and that was based on 2% of our rural median household income. In Alberta, that's 60,000. If we were live, I would ask, you know, how that compares to BC. The one caution is it's a household income, and often in rural areas you have farms or agribusiness, or it's like commercial. So rural areas can have very strange median household income numbers. Depending if it's a good agricultural area, it can be really high or it can be really low if, you know, farming isn't good or it's the neighborhood is turning. What I guess just in terms of practice, I'd encourage each of you to look up that number for your area. It helps change the conversation around you know, having numbers that you can compare to other communities, not just water rates. So here goes. Basically, we had these two lines. We could plot the intersect points, so right here and right here. And just to look at the number. So with all this math, we found the population around 360 for groundwater and 920, really specific. Let's be honest, 300 and 900 were the populations where you would start running into affordability. So small groundwater systems with less than 360 people would face affordability challenges, and surface water, it's 920. Below that could be affordability problems. We know this, right? Surface water costs more than groundwater. Surface water requires more treatment. That's not surprising. But what was I think what's one interesting thing you can take away from this analysis right here is groundwater systems. You can have very small sites, and it's still affordable, sustainable, if they're willing to pay, a decent amount. And surface water, you really need 1,000 people at least to be sustainable and affordable. So, what are some solutions? I'll go through these pretty quick. I know a lot of these have been explored in BC. So one is point of entry treatment, especially for light industrial, or this was a hostel, Shunda Creek. They put in NSF 55A units at the point of entry instead of in a treatment building. So they shifted the treatment, but again, it's a light industrial setting, seemed to work there. Point of use treatment for chemical parameters. This was an example was for fluoride. We have quite a bit of fluoride here. So they actually installed RO, reverse osmosis, in the kitchen tap, and it's a regulated point. It gets tested through the year and sampled for. One of the systems actually provides the RO filter, and the other doesn't. But again, it's a cost-effective way to deal with that chemical. Bottle fills are an interesting one. There's one regulated one. It's in a hamlet, and it's a country residential. So it allowed people had their own wells. It allowed them to have safe water and not have to bring it in when they came to their country residential. So that it's unique, but it also can fill a niche in certain areas, especially really small sites. Just move ahead. So the one I think that's generated the most interest is this trickle fill, and this one, I'm just gonna, there we go. So it's trickle fill because it's a small diameter, and it fills a cistern at the property, so in the basement or in the yard. But what we found in the last 10, 15 years in Alberta is it was a huge development because directional drilling technology improved and trenching improved. And so between those two and the geology here, so open, especially open farmland, it was very easy to build hundreds of kilometers of these systems. So we ended up presenting this out at ACE last year, back when we could travel, and got some interesting feedback of how this works in other places. And again, it's a fascinating little project there. The other emerging solution is restructuring, which is basically amalgamation. So being assumed by a county or municipal district. An example there. And actually, a lot of the co-ops in Alberta here are amalgamating. We're seeing amalgamation maybe with a neighboring system as they hit the 40-year lifespan. It's expensive, but on the other hand, this restructuring manual has actually been a very good read. It's from 1991, but it's still very relevant and offers solutions. So that's, yeah, and the last emerging solution is the capacity development, like that circuit rider. Alberta did a closer to home project and drinking water safety plans. So sort of training, either very focused at one site or maybe more, for 10 or 15 sites at a time. So it's hard to see because I can't see you in the audience, but hopefully you've stayed with me. Just going to conclude and then we'll go through numbers. And I see I have 10 more minutes. That's right. So we'll go through this. So basically, what does this all mean? If nothing else, doing marginal cost recovery is an acceptable interim measure. It sends a price signal to customers, and really, since doing this research, if someone asks my opinion over coffee, I'll say, are you doing marginal cost recovery? Like that's where you should start, because most sites haven't done that. Community cost recovery, it may be feasible, and it's a very good target to have because it gives you freedom to do upgrades and maintenance and save money by having reserves. And the best, the industry standard is this full cost recovery. And I won't get into the manuals until next slide. It does appear to be a challenge for small systems under 1,000 people. So revenue shortfalls are expected if affordability is considered. And here's the populations. 360 people, for groundwater and 920. I should say, and I missed the real audience. The question I'd ask is, what is the one solution that I haven't covered? And really, I've mentioned it throughout, it's that grants are given, provincial or federal, are given, or even municipal, in a regional municipality. They are given to these small systems because of the public health benefit. So that's one way the revenues are addressed, but even relying on those grant fundings has risks. So if you want to read more about this, AUMA, so Alberta Urban Municipality Association, had a primer. BCWWA, which probably most of you are comfortable with or familiar with. I really enjoyed reading that when I was doing my research. And then M1 and M54 are like the two. M1 is the big book. M54 says, yeah, that's great, but for small systems, here's how you do it. So M54 definitely provides more focused support for small systems, and I'd recommend that. And the newest one has even included discussions on affordability since my research. So, are you awake? You guys awake out there? Hopefully. And it's now time to do these worksheets. Okay. Here we go. So you should have received a worksheet like this. And what I'm going to do is just, you'll see that there's different blanks here, right? So what I'll do is go through each one and talk it through. Hopefully you have a chance to follow along and do the math on it. And even if I'm not sure how it's working at your office or at your home office, you can write the numbers in and then go back and do the math. The idea was, how do you do a simple calculation to check where your system is at? So looking at the time, we'll be done this in about 7 minutes, and then we have time for questions. So I'm missing you guys. So here goes. Annualized capital cost. Basically, what's the total cost? What's the lifespan? So for this scenario, we did, 2 plus 5 plus 0.75 divided by 25 years, works out to 310,000 per year. And then to get that into capital cost per cubic meter, we divided it by the volume, which is right here. So the volume per year, and the number comes out to 3.44 cubic meters. And then to look at the O&M cost, here we looked at operator, utilities, supplies, repairs, and divided by the annual volume. you're following along, you should see this 0.5, which is, looks like the system has half an operator. So maybe the operator is running 2 plants. That you can divide by 0.5. Those costs, let's say chemical and whatnot. So the O&M cost would be $1.1 per cubic meter. So looking at the total cost, you just add the two. So it comes out to 4.54. And that one, if you're following along, maybe you've even pre-done the work, is A, which we'll get to. So you can put it at the bottom of that chart. Community costs. So the only trick here is that it's capital cost times 0.25, because what we're assuming is there's 75% grant funding. So running the numbers again, it comes out to 1.96 per cubic meter. And the marginal cost is a fancy way of, we approximate it by saying it's the O&M cost. It's just day to day for the next couple of years, how much does it cost? So that's the marginal cost, 1.1. And then looking at revenue, it's just the amount of money coming in. So when we were looking at it, we just looked at the total number and then divided it. So here we're getting 1.67. Now here's the goods. You put it into that chart at the end, and this is what we're looking for. You divide the numbers, divide and divide. So this scenario, I'm going to go to the next slide. This scenario covers day-to-day costs. Actually quite well, 151% in the marginal cost recovery, okay? Community cost, they're doing 85% cost recovery in that scenario. So it doesn't cover the community's portion of capital. I mean, what might be happening here, maybe there's a land tax that's, allocated to cover the debt financing or something. Maybe not, maybe they just are paying it out of some other revenue. And then when you look at full cost, it's 50%. So that's assuming no grants come in the future. The problem with not doing full cost recovery is you're not in a position to self-fund future upgrades. So really, you're always relying on grants. And there's a danger with that. You don't have control over when you upgrade and when you want to build. So if I was live, I would ask this. And since we're virtual live, I would just ask these questions as we reflect. How much do you pay for your cell phone bill? And what are your rates? How are your rates set right now? What are the risks associated with your rate setting approach? And what are the benefits with that approach? If you're a small system listening, I'd be curious to know, how you compare to those populations and for the different sources. And if you're having the same struggles, let's say you're a 200-person water system from a groundwater. Have you found a way to make it affordable, recovery of costs, or are you relying on grant funding? Same thing with surface water. Maybe you're a 600-person community and you have surface water. Are you having troubles, and are you accessing, basically all the innovative solutions that you can? So I think the takeaway is by doing simple math, it gets you thinking about the implications. And then hopefully the little worksheet helps you check your own system, not by doing a full cost or full accounting study, but doing a screening tool. And then if you have concerns, you can bring in a team to help with the rate structure and all the accounting. So with that, just want to acknowledge, Rizzo, the first version of it provided support, which was fantastic. Rizzo 1.0, and as well Brock University and UC, and then Alberta Environment and Parks and Alberta Infrastructure, and then the staff, CAOs and operators for getting the information was huge. I'm going to include the references just for future if people want to look it up. And I think with that, I will pause for questions.
Much for that, Aaron. That was a very informative session. I know that lots of finance departments are especially looking at rates right now, and as some of these departments, especially the utilities side, roll into asset management planning, that's one thing that lots of local governments are looking at is their rate structures for water and wastewater. So I thought that was great. So Aaron, we have a couple of questions here for you. One question is, do any of the systems use a graduated system of tolls?
Oh, yes. Yeah, almost. Actually, I'll flip back to the range. Yeah, most of them do. You notice like 25 bucks. I can tell you pretty certainly if the rate was $25, sorry, pardon me as I go through, if it was $25, that was just a flat rate, right? But a lot of them had a threshold, like the average use. So you pay the flat rate for that average use. And then as you got over that, you started paying. I think I had 25 different styles of rates in 25 systems. I actually had to build probably 7 columns in my Excel spreadsheet because one system had like incremental rate structure. But yeah, if you're looking for really cool resource on rates is University of North Carolina EFC, Environmental Finance Center. They have a lot of webinars focused on small systems and on how to set graduated rates and the science of it and then the art of it. And yeah, that's been one of the ongoing webinars I keep watching. So yeah.
Thank you. Another question coming in. When you were working on your master's, had you considered small systems like trailer parks or systems with 5 to 100 users? You said that it takes 1,000 users to pay for a system. Who pays for the smaller systems?
So yes, I considered it. And I actually had a whole data set of campgrounds. So sort of that trailer park mentality, it became really problematic to compare and as a data set. So we ended up, partly because our focus was on municipal water. So I started, I had quite a nice data set, but it got very hard to compare. To answer the second question, who actually pays for it? So I think it usually gets paid for when the system gets developed and then the lots are sold. But it rarely at the end of that life, so let's say 25 to 40 years, at the end of that, there's rarely an appetite or an ability to raise that initial amount of money again. And that's actually what that amalgamation study from the EOCP, they talk about restructuring or restarting. And so that's what I found with those systems that I work with. They tend to do it as a one-time thing when the lots get sold. Yeah. And I imagine, because there's a lot of those in BC, eh? Like non-municipal water users.
Thank you. How many users do you need to get grant funding?
So in Alberta, it has to be municipal. So as long as it's a hamlet, town, village, it's eligible. And that's part of why we looked at it. We could find cost data on those systems, like capital funding. But yeah, there's no, as long as you're a hamlet, you're eligible in Alberta.
Okay. How do you define total capital cost? Actual today value of cost to replace entire infrastructure?
So whoever asked that should volunteer as an author on M1 manual. We took the approach, so we took a simplified approach. We took all the capital costs that were spent and we brought them all into 1 year. So we corrected for the value of money changing over time for inflation. We brought them all into 1 year, and we had 2 or 3 years of O&M and revenue. So we brought everything into 1 year, and then we did straight line depreciation. So we divided it by 25. We didn't look at what it would cost in the future, but we thought by looking at 25 years, most of the systems in Alberta have upgraded in the last 25 years. So it seemed fair to just say, we'll look at actual cost, but we did time correct, and that was a whole exercise. And yeah, I think that answers it. But there's another way. The reason I was joking about M1 is there's another method which you calculate what you would need to build, the cost if you built it tomorrow, and then you recover for that. It seemed, that seemed very rigorous and very good for a large municipality, but for a small site, didn't fit our study. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So that concludes the end of this session and the last session of the water stream for our conference. I want to say thank you to Aaron for joining us on behalf of the EOCP. So thank you for bringing that session to us today.
Thank you for having me, and hope everyone has a great day.